All right, good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Lakewood City Council, June 12th, 2017, 7 p.m. in council chambers. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Paul?
Here.
Coop? Wickman?
Here.
Gutwein?
Here.
Franks?
Here.
Harrison?
Here.
Royball?
Here.
Vincent?
Here.
Abel?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Shakti?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Welcome. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and joining us, taking part in your local government. If you would just do me one favor, if you happen to have a cell phone, please put that on silent. Ask that you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Remain standing for a moment of silent prayer. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. All right. Will the clerk please read item 4?
Item 4, recognition, Senior Heroes Award winners.
Are our Senior Hero Award winners here with us tonight, by chance? Okay. Well, then I'm just going to read these from the dais. So this is a nice opportunity to recognize two wonderful folks in our community. And wait till you hear about them. So Shirley Otis, 86 years old, and volunteers 80 hours per month for the last 11 years. Shirley does it all for Eaton Senior Communities, and she calls Alameda Gateway members every month to remind them of the monthly meetings. She manages the candy cart 3 days each week and hands out juice and snacks to residents in assisted living 3 days each week. She encourages and assists low vision residents with the computer iPad project. She provides caregiving for a 101-year-old friend in assisted living who just celebrated her birthday a couple weeks ago. And the little quote here, Shirley is simply a wonderful advocate for our Eaton community and her fellow residents. Even though gradually losing her own vision, Shirley has remained committed to her volunteer activities. So let's give Shirley a round of applause. That's cool. I actually got to meet her when we were celebrating her pal's 101st birthday. And then next up, we have Edwin Rossalon, 91 years old, and volunteers 25 hours plus per month for the last 20 years. Edwin was a staff sergeant for the Army Air Corps, serving as a nose gunner stationed in Italy. Edwin began volunteering following the death of his wife in 1997 at the clinic where she received cancer treatments. Then he discovered the Knights of Columbus associated with St. Bernadette's Catholic Church and School in Wheat Ridge. That's actually in Lakewood. Here are volunteer projects that Edwin is involved in. Picks up food and assembles food backpacks for needy children every Friday. Organizes coffee and donuts for St. Bernadette's to encourage community and neighborhood sharing. Runs the aluminum can collection project to collect funds for St. Bernadette's School. Manages the Knights of Columbus Hall, providing a meeting place for community groups. Sells Tootsie Rolls to benefit the mentally impaired. Sells peaches to benefit St. Bernadette's seminarians. Plans and participates in one major fundraiser annually to benefit St. Bernadette's Church and School. Formerly drove physically and mentally challenged young adults to a monthly coffee house for music, dancing, and socializing. Amazing. So congratulations to these incredible leaders in our community, and we wish they were here to celebrate, but we'll make sure that they know that we were celebrating them tonight. So next up is public comment. This is the point in the meeting where the public is invited to address the City Council on items that did not appear on the agenda. All comments should be directed to the City Council. I ask that all in attendance observe the decorum of the City Council chambers and refrain from applause or audible support or discord with the speaker. There is a 3-minute limit per speaker. This little box here will glow green when your 2.5 minutes is, when you're at 2.5 minutes, it'll go yellow. When your time is up is red. And if you really feel like you want to clap for the speaker, we've adopted the sign language clap, so that's cool. So first up on the list, I have Mr. Chisholm. Good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay.
I guess no. Could you pull the microphone a little closer?
City Council, Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, greeting. My name is Jay Chisholm. I'm the property owner at 1595 Carr, Lakewood, Colorado. This is Unit C and D. In January of 2016, I started work on these units without a permit. I was in a hurry to get them done so I could lease them out. You see, I was greedy. This was wrong. I take full responsibility for my actions. In doing so, I did not show respect for the Lakewood Public Works Department. I wish to apologize to Ann Hine and Jay Hutchison. Please forgive me. I think I've been reformed. Since this time, I hired a general contractor. He has issued an electrical permit for units A, B, C, and D, roofing, framing, and mechanical permits for unit A, and a stair permit for unit E. Most of this work has been inspected by the city, and permits have been closed out. I wish to thank Ann and Jay for their patience in working with me this past year. I wish to thank Mike Sizemore for his help with the building permits. Ann and Jay have given me 5 feet. Thank you very much. Could I trouble you for another 2 feet? With another 2 feet, we could make the building look like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chisholm, and I'll just take a quick second to thank you for your patience and your dedication, and I think we're getting close. Pat Benjamin? Well, good evening. It's been a while. Nice to see you.
Thank you. It's nice to see you. I'm Pat Benjamin. I live in Heritage West, and the main thing I came here for tonight is to thank you, whoever's responsible, for putting the street signs up that indicate what the next signal is. It's great. I don't know if you guys did that or who did it, but thank you very much. Second thing, this afternoon I went over to Ute Trail Garden. You probably know about that. And I live in Heritage West. We have a community garden that is owned by Lakewood. Several years ago, a couple of us fenced it and took really good care of it. But now the elk and the deer and the rabbits and everything has just torn it to pieces. We don't mind fixing it and putting a fence up, but it's getting a little expensive. We're wondering if there's any way that we could possibly get any help from the city of Lakewood, since you do own it. And that's all.
Well, thank you. We will
Thank
make
you.
sure somebody gets back to you.
Okay.
And we'll probably have to thank the Colorado Department of Transportation for those nice signs.
Oh, great. It is wonderful. Thank you.
Mr. Baker. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Paul, Council. Robert Baker, President of Mid-Lakewood Civic Association, and back again for the third time tonight to continue to discuss what's going on with CCU and the housing issue in our neighborhood with CCU. I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank Ramey Johnson and Charlie Abel for all the amount of work and interest and support they've given the neighborhood in working this, hopefully to a good conclusion. As you all know, I'm sure there are further discussions that have been generated recently between CCU and the city, and I held a special board meeting yesterday on a Sunday afternoon to get some input from our board as to how those talks were going and so forth, which I think you're aware of after your session this afternoon. And I understand that CCU has a meeting tomorrow, but what I'd like to encourage from council is that some encouragement be made to CCU to respond in a timely fashion. There's some urgency here in terms of some of the tenants that are involved over on Cody Court. We're down to the wire on their timeframes. And we met with the city, or excuse me, with Ramey and Charlie and the new president of CCU 2 weeks ago now. At that time, we respectfully asked for a timely response to what's going on and some idea of what they are willing to do or not willing to do. That has not happened in a 2-week period now. So that's where we're at, and I appreciate everybody's continued interest and understanding of this issue, and we hope we can work something out.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mace. Good evening, sir. Welcome.
Mayor, City Council members, I'd like to start off. I have a question for Council Abel. Yesterday, when I talked to you, were you able to run by and check out the crosswalk issue that I talked to you about in Belmar?
I was. You're absolutely right.
Okay, and then my next issue.
Explain though to council the subject of our discussion.
Okay, I can do that. There's a crosswalk that does not have a walk signal in Belmar. So I immediately talked to Councilor Abel yesterday at King Soopers, and I noticed that there's crosswalk tape, but there's no crosswalk signal in Belmar. And yesterday, when I was crossing from the Whole Foods side over to the Target side, I almost got hit. Now, this is the third or fourth time that I've been up here discussing this issue. Please, council, do something about this. This is very important. Otherwise, people are going to get hit again. And I've been up here numerous times to discuss this issue. Mayor, as you know, a couple years ago, I was hit by a car, and I do not want to see other people get hit. So I'm requesting that council do something about this immediately. And my next issue is, again, I have been told that the City of Lakewood is working on an ordinance for the grocery cart issue. Again, this is becoming a problem because I'm tired of pulling grocery carts back. I don't mind doing it to help the city out, but it's not my responsibility. Thank you.
Sure. Ron Lorenz, and then Mary Gillickson. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ron Lorenz. I live at 1925 South Route Court in Heritage West. Several of us here from Heritage West are concerned about the proposed improvement in the old Dardanos restaurant property, 1,100 or 11,000 plus Jewel. Anyway, we've written our concerns to the planning zoning group, and of course they include lighting and runoff and density, height, setbacks, and all of those things. I guess my purpose in being here tonight is just to express our concern about that improvement up there. It'll be there for 100 years, and it's going to be out of character with the rest of the neighborhood. We would ask that at least under current zoning, you all take a close look at it. I guess I'm disappointed that the current zoning regs would allow an improvement like this with the minimal setbacks and the densities and all that. So I'm just raising our concerns at this point. There are others here that will also address this. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And Councilor Gutwein and I will be meeting with you and your neighbors tomorrow night. So Mary. Good evening.
Thank you for allowing public comment. Attending these meetings always makes me appreciate the many important decisions that you make for the city of Lakewood. I was reminded recently of a good decision that the city made a year or so ago. I'm not implying that it was the last good decision that was made, but it was significant to me. I'm talking about the decision to pull out of the $25 million swap for 59 acres of contaminated property at the Federal Center. Having been an environmental consultant for over 25 years and having remediated these types of properties and provided testimony in lawsuits over liabilities associated with these properties, I can say it was a good decision to pull out of that deal. I realize that several preliminary studies were done, and I was able to look at the results of some of those, but a comprehensive study to fully be able to understand the potential financial impacts and liabilities was not done. So I don't know how this decision was made, whether it was through the result of thorough analysis or a reaction to public input. But I believe in making future decisions, if you use good, thorough analysis prior to making the decision and take into account citizen input, then I think you'll be making the best decision that you can for the future of Lakewood and avoid the liabilities associated with poor decision making and failing to properly weigh in citizen input. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Mr. Havey, and then, I don't know, is it Mona Faber? Maria. All right. You're up next. Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, much like Ron Lorenz, I'm here to talk about the development that's adjacent to Heritage West. And I know I've met actually quite a few of you. I think some of you have responded to emails that I've sent, and also a letter that we sent out as a neighborhood. And so I want to thank you all for that. The purpose of me being here is really to express the concerns that I think a lot of us have. We're not anti-development. I think if you ask all of us, we'd love to see the building behind us go away. It's been an eyesore for about 5 years, maybe longer. We're just concerned about what goes in its place, how big it is, how it blends with the community that we have. Most of us are 20 and 30-year homeowners that have lived adjacent to this property, and I think a lot of us, when we bought, checked into the zoning that existed at that time. We had a pretty good knowledge of what could be possible, and when we find what's being put in today, I think our concern is, does it fit with what we've always expected? It's certainly an awful lot taller and larger. I don't know if you can see the attachments that I've got or not.
If you
but
could flip them.
flip them.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
So the one that's on the top is our homes and the property with the current building on it. As you can tell, the building's relatively small and the parking lots around it are actually quite large. And I think most of us always expected that it would stay somewhat similar to that. We wouldn't be surprised that some of the parking lot would someday go away, but what we're getting today in terms of the new development is on the bottom. And as you can tell, the property basically goes almost lot line to lot line. And for those of us that live east and south of the property, it's going to be an enormous change, not to mention the fact that the building's going to move from about a one-story building to a three-story building. And so those are our concerns. And we appreciate the fact that the mayor is going to meet with us, and Councilwoman Gutwein, we appreciate all your help. And we hope all of you will listen. And this is not really the only issue. It's that we have concerns about all of these developments in Lakewood.
Sure. So, thank you. And we didn't mean to leave Mayor Pro Tem Harrison out, but only two of us can go, or else it'll be a public meeting, and I don't know if the Havies want to have a public meeting at their house. So, Maria. Sorry. We'll fill you in.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome. How are you?
Good. Always well. I want to talk to you very briefly about the Lakewood's power grid. And I know all of you have been hearing about this. None of you are unaware about the vulnerability to attacks either by our enemies or by natural causes. I mean, North Korea has broadcast that they plan on doing it. And quite frankly, anyone can take a gun and knock it out. Maybe that's a little simplistic, but it is something that can happen soon at any point in time. My hope is that you, knowing the imminent danger to the power grid, will act fast to harden the power grid. And I'm associated with a group who's going to speak after me, and they not only will tell you about the dangers of the power grid, but also they have solutions to harden it. And it's a blueprint that I'm praying that you follow, or at least follow up on with them. And so they are ready to help you. They can advise you on not only the cost of hardening the power grid if you meet with them, but also the time frame to complete the project. And I think that's wonderful, and that's in your wheelhouse. So with this information, you can begin the project quickly, and I do hope you do. If you do this, you're going to stand uniquely alone in this country as the only municipality that has proactively protected not only the power grid, but the citizens who depend on it for survival. So thank you so much for your time.
Great. Mr. Rhodes. Good evening. It's been a long time. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening, members of the City Council and Mayor Adam Paul and my fellow citizens. My name is Glenn Rhodes. I've been a citizen in Lakewood since, probably since '84. After graduating from the University of Colorado with a degree in environmental design, and then later an MBA from the University of Phoenix in alternative transportation usage. I'm currently the Western Regional Director for the EMP Task Force on National Homeland Security based here in Lakewood, Colorado, and endorsed by the EMP Congressional Caucus to either advise or seek expert opinion on any and all technical and operational and policy matters of relevance concerning EMP's impact on critical infrastructures, including electrical power, communications, transportation, energy, banking and finance, food and water. Our national director is Dr. Peter Vincent Pry, who is the Chief of Staff of the EMP Commission in Washington, D.C. And in 2003, with the full endorsement of the National Science Foundation, I founded the Lakewood-based Nanotechnology Initiative, which culminated in the first nanotechnology and fabrication lab at the University of Colorado. So why am I here tonight? Well, scientists tell us there are 4 great powers in the universe. There's strong and weak atomic bonding, electromagnetism, and gravity. Only recently have scientists brought to light electromagnetism's potential catastrophic interaction with Colorado's power grid, And in a worst-case scenario, it would transport us to the Stone Age within a period of less than 1 nanosecond to several minutes with no hope of recovery. Therefore, it is with utmost urgency that we ask for a call to action to have our group and the FBI Public Sector Partnership, called the InfoGuard EMP SIG, convey this knowledge to you in possibly a follow-up study session based on the logistical parameters that we would hopefully work out with the council. We're taking the same message to other city councils across the state, but you are the first city council we've decided to approach, and I hope you'll take the leadership position seriously. My EMP journey started on March the 11th, 2011, when I spoke to atmospheric space weather expert, Dr. Daniel Baker from the LASP, Laboratory in Atmospheric and Space Physics. And I was made aware for the first time of at least 6 government studies and reports that indicated under no uncertain conditions that our current electrical power grid, comprising of generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity, was in fact a thinly veiled cocoon prone to not only an occasional power outage from solar weather, but also to a potential long-duration extended power outage lasting from a few days to possibly even a few months, which is really scary. Serious questions generated to civic leaders in dealing with a post-EMP event, for example, are how to provide fresh water and fuel to our citizens when no water and fuel pumps operate, or how do we prevent the quick onset of serious health concerns when, as a community, we are no longer able to process human waste dependent on electrical power to function? What measures can we take to protect the largest transformers in Lakewood that could be easily damaged by extreme weather, space weather, or a high-altitude EMP? I've talked to various members of public utilities, and while sympathetic to our concern, they are faced with a challenging regulatory and legal environment that hinders speedy work towards sustainability, security, and resilience. Since beginning this journey and until tonight, I'm frustrated that the issue of electrical grid security has not been realized. We know it's a complex issue, but the stark reality is that the existing vulnerability of the power grid allows Lakewood to live in an environment that exceeds its carrying capacity. If the grid fails, we're at risk of losing thousands of Lakewood residents. And so all I'm asking is that the council consider possibly a study-up session that would get you up to speed on the physics and the consequences to the power grid. Thank you all for this time, and hopefully you'll listen to the other members of our group talk.
Great. Thank you very much. Dwight, and then I have Mike Sutherland. Good evening.
Good evening. Mayor, City Council, appreciate you guys listening to us. I've talked to a couple of you, and you understand the threat that we're talking about. Electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, is a real threat. It's got real science behind it. We've known about this for a number of decades now, ever since we started developing nuclear weapons. But its dangers exceed even that. Even if we were 100% successful at stopping the bad guys, the sun will impact us. Back in 1859, we had what was called the Carrington event, which was a coronal mass ejection, or CME, that reacted with the Earth's magnetic field. And as you change a magnetic field, you create an electric current. The currents were so intense at the time that it took out the new technology of the time. Notice I said 1859. That was the telegraph. Also took out the transatlantic cable. The telegraph offices around the world were catching on fire. The Aurora Borealis was seen in Havana, Cuba. So we had an event similar to this that crossed the Earth's atmosphere, or across the Earth's orbit in 2012. Fortunately, we weren't there when it crossed. We were 2 weeks away. So we barely missed it. Now, I don't want to leave you with the thoughts that this is hopeless. There are things that can be done. Our military has worked hard in electronics for a number of years, but the power grid for the U.S. has not been worked. As the Colorado State Coordinator for the EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security, my job is to try to get the voice out, or get our voice out there, let people understand this threat, and help guide city councils like this on what they can do to help protect their citizens in the event that this happens, in the real event that this happens. And it will happen. Like I said, there are people out there that are really out to try to hurt the American public, our culture, with one weapon detonated at 400 kilometers over Kansas. They could take out the U.S. power grid for years, maybe decades. And we're totally unprepared for it at this point. We don't have to be unprepared. We can prepare for it. And so I ask that the City Council invite us back for a special study session so that we can tell you what the threat is, tell you more about what the threat is, hopefully without scaring you all too much, and tell you what you can do to help protect your citizens in your city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike? Mike, are you with the same group?
Yes, I am.
Do you have better news for us?
Well, first, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Mike Sutherland. I live in Parker. And I'm retired from the Parker Public Works Department last October after serving for 12 years as the Director of Public Works and the Emergency Operations Center. I have also in past lives served on the Grand Junction City Council and was manager of the Grand Junction Airport. That's where I first became really involved in emergency preparedness, response, and management. And in Douglas County, I, for the past decade, have served as an incident commander on the incident management team there, and also serve as a terrorism liaison officer for the state of Colorado. We could spend hours and hours talking about this and the different aspects of it, but I really just want to hit on three elements from a public works standpoint that could be affected by any extended power outage. There were references to electromagnetic pulse, which would likely be from a terrorist group, from our dear sun that shines on us every day. Events happen all the time there, but now we have hackers who already have malware in our electronic grid, our electric grid, and all of our other electronics, including all telecommunications. We know that, they just haven't pushed the button on it yet. So the three critical public works aspects I want to talk about briefly are water, sanitary sewer, and traffic signals. Water obviously has to be pumped, whether it's pumped from the aquifer in this area, from a lake, or from a river, and that requires electricity. The need for electricity to purify that water and deliver it is very critical, and without that, we're all going to get very thirsty very fast. Second piece, sanitary sewer, similar to water, there's a very high need for electricity to pump and process that sewage, and that includes lift stations. Every aspect of sanitary sewer requires a lot of electricity, and very few pieces of that infrastructure have backup generation that would last for any real length of time. And once that sanitation is compromised, it'll lead rapidly to spread of disease, namely typhoid, cholera, and diphtheria are the ones we have to worry most about. And within a couple of days, we could all be looking for tall bushes, and we know where that would lead with a large population. Then the third piece is traffic signals, obviously all powered by electricity. Many have backup batteries, most don't, but even with backup batteries, you're lucky if you have 3 hours while that will last. And I would ask, how many city resources will be tied up directing traffic and or responding to accidents should our signal system go out? So just those three elements are really important to all of us in our everyday life. A day-long week-long or months-long power outage really affects us, particularly with those first two. Generators are helpful, but those require fuel and a lot of staff to continuously refuel those. A few years ago in Douglas County, we did an exercise called Operation Lights Out. And one of the amazing things we learned during our research was there was not one single gas station in all of Douglas County that had a backup generator. Now, most all of our municipalities, fire authorities, others have fuel facilities, and most all of those have backup generation. But should a large-scale power outage occur, we're not going to see deliveries of fuel to even our local governments. And folks, unfortunately, have a fantasy that local, state, and federal government are going to come to our aid, but we all know that isn't going to happen right away. So what I would urge council is to, as mentioned before, allow us to fill you in a little more, scare you more. I don't have great news, but I can tell you that a lot of people are thinking about this and worrying about it. I tried to write an extended power outage annex to our emergency operations plan for the town of Parker a few years ago, and it was really intimidating to even know where to start with that. And sadly, one of the first things a local government will need to do is to impose martial law to protect food and medicines, first and foremost. So there's a lot we can do, but thinking ahead, looking at hardening our grid and those elements that are most critical to us are very, very important. So thank you for the time for us to speak tonight.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming out. Randy White? Randy's going to bring the good news.
Actually, I am. Good to meet you, Mayor, council people. Thank you very much for letting us be here. My name is Randy White. I'm the CEO and the chairman of the board of an engineering firm in Colorado Springs, Colorado, that specializes in hardening systems to nuclear weapons effects, including EMP. And yes, the good news is we've been doing this for 40 years, and we're global. So we literally are all over the world doing this for different countries. I represent here tonight as kind of a pro bono member of the FBI InfraGard group that a lot of these people are from. I'm one of their EMP subject matter experts. So I'd like to use 30 seconds of my 3 minutes to show you something that only about 50 people in the world have ever seen. And I don't know if this will project from your camera, otherwise I'll just turn it around and show it to you. But this is what happens to common electronics if by chance we were ever to see an electromagnetic pulse happen. And let's see if this works.
But we can turn on, let's turn on that real quick. There we go.
Yeah, that works.
This is volume. It's going to go real fast.
Right into the light bulb. This would be directly coupling on any copper lines that are coming into your facility. So we're ready to fire. So let's go 3, 2, 1, fire.
So we used to tell people that when an EMP event happened from a nuclear weapons, that it would just be silent. The lights would just go off. We started doing this for a lot of the local state reps, some of our senators, and we found out that it's not silent at all. It blows things up. Like every light bulb in this room, if it were to happen like right now, in 14 nanoseconds, which is pretty stinking fast. The E1 portion, which is the quickest little form of EMP, comes ripping down the line, and then is followed immediately by something that acts kind of like lightning. We call that the E2 pulse. And so I brought the little light bulb. So that little experiment that we do for a lot of people just shows that simultaneously we'd all be covered in glass dust and everything's dark. But guys, it's really not about a light bulb, but in a lot of ways it is, because that's not just your light bulb that goes dead. It's every light bulb in Lakewood. It's every light bulb in Colorado. Every light bulb in Oklahoma, Colorado, Texas, and every computer, and every bank account, and every utilities, like Mike was talking about, the pumps at the lift stations and the water systems, simultaneously, literally in no longer than 200 microseconds after E2 goes through, we have a dead system. And we are so stinking dependent upon electricity that, yeah, we are pushing the noodle at the national level, A lot of us speak at different senates and different states, trying to figure out which state or which city is going to take the initiative to actually kind of start taking this serious. Now, I have in this little box Governor Hickenlooper's State Emergency Operation Plan, 498 pages, and I am the stucky that has to rewrite this. Now, Mike before me tried to do it. There's 498 pages here. There's 40 pages on what the state is planning to do for us all in case we get hit by an asteroid. So 40 pages on an asteroid, 0 pages on what happens if we have an extended power outage. So we've kind of stopped using this term about EMP because yes, EMP causes lights out, but there's like 5 major threats to our culture, to America, that could cause lights out for an extended period of time. So right now I'm the guy trying to write in this annex that Mike tried a number of years ago, and it is a beast. If I were Governor Hickenlooper and somebody dropped this on my desk and said, that's your instructions for what to do in case there's an emergency, I would just beat them with a 2x4. It is so impractical. So we're trying to write an annex that actually would trickle down really to all kinds of cities, including like Lakewood, that the governor could come down and say, okay, I need on day one so many toilets to be distributed across the different locations, porta potties, portable generators going to water stations, portable generators going to hospitals. So right now, none of that exists. And what we're encouraging people across different states, all the way back to North Carolina and Texas and Kansas to here, is we would like every city to start thinking about, do some critical thinking about what is the most important thing in your infrastructure that you could not lose. What's going to be your pecking order? Because we will then take that, we'll write it into this beast. And so anyway, thank you for letting me have 3 minutes plus probably.
Great, no, thank you.
You guys are troopers. Thanks for serving and doing this job. Probably pretty thankless. Huh?
We always like special effects, so that's good.
Show and tell? Oh.
Benjamin?
Go for hours.
Go for hours.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You bet.
Good evening.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, and citizens. So I'm the last one, and I'm sorry if you're not going to sleep tonight. This is real stuff that we have to pay attention to, and I'd rather talk about it and know about it than ignore it. My name is Benjamin Dancer. I'm a Jeffco English teacher, and I'm the author of the literary thriller Patriarch Run that considers the events we're talking about today. So I'd like to add 2 things to what we've heard on this topic. First, the designers of the bulk power grid system in America never considered that in 2017 our very lives would depend on reliable, widely available electrical power. This is not an exaggeration. Our food system in America is dependent on electricity. So is the delivery of safe drinking water, so is the manufacture of fuel, and therefore our transportation system. Our healthcare system depends on it. We could barely communicate without it, and without it, commerce would nearly cease. The second thing I'd like to add is my own personal viewpoint, not the viewpoint of the EMP task force, which we represent. I am troubled by the partisan divide growing in this country. What troubles me most is that the left doesn't seem to be able to listen to the truth on the right. Neither does the right seem to be able to listen to the truth on the left. For example, the left seems to recognize that climate change is a real threat. And the right seems to recognize that the vulnerability of our critical infrastructure is a real threat. I'd like to point out that both of these threats are rooted in energy. In other words, we can mitigate them simultaneously with the same solution. But we'd have to listen to the other side in order to do that. Republican Senator Owen Hill and Democratic Representative Joanne Janal, forgive me if I mispronounced her name, co-sponsored legislation 2 years ago asking the state of Colorado to study the vulnerability of our critical infrastructure. This body could take inspiration from that bipartisan action and lead the way forward for America to unite and to solve real problems. The EMP Task Force on National and Homeland Security is asking the Council to respond to this call of action by holding a special study session on the vulnerability of our critical infrastructure and the threat it poses to our local community. Should this body decide to pursue that important work, our task force would be happy to provide it with the resources and the expertise necessary to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out. Don Sorensen? Good evening, welcome.
Thank you. Hopefully my topic's a little lighter. Council, Mayor, I'm here just simply to thank you for signing on to the we are still in open letter to the world in support of the Paris Accords. It is going to be leadership at the city and business and individual level that's going to take us forward on climate change. Clearly, the current administration has stepped away from its responsibility in that regard. 184 cities signed on, 183 along with Lakewood, 9 states, 290 higher education organizations, and 1,471 businesses and investors signed on to that letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. I think they're up to over 211. Nancy? Hi. Good evening.
My name is Nancy Grusho, and I live in Ward 1. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Mayor Paul for his support of the Paris Climate Agreement. Since the U.S. pullout, 12 states have signed on to the U.S. Climate Alliance. Over 274 U.S. mayors and counting are supporting the goals of the Paris Accords through the Mayor's National Climate Action Agenda. Other Colorado cities, in addition to Lakewood, that have signed on are Aspen, Boulder, Denver, Edgewater, Fort Collins, Lafayette, Longmont, Telluride, and Vail. You know, basically the goal is to reduce CO2 emissions by 26 to 28% from the by 2025 from the 2005 levels. It's a non-binding agreement. You know, Governor Hickenlooper has yet to announce whether he will join the 12 states that have signed on. So I really urge all those here that are in support of this to call the governor's office and ask him to sign on to the U.S. Climate Alliance. The 12 states that are already signed on represent about 31% of the U.S. GDP. You know, as our global temperatures increase with the burning of fossil fuels, we run the risk of an increasing number of extreme weather events, which you're all familiar with. You know, the mayor and every council member here are committed to serve the city of Lakewood and its residents. And to be honest, it's got to be a difficult job because you're never going to make everyone happy. So I thank you for all serving. But an even more difficult job than serving is one of leadership. It takes courage to lead. A quote sent to me by a friend says, "Courage is the power to let go of the familiar." And fossil fuels is very familiar. When we are faced with the risk of devastating climate change, we look for the leadership that has the mental toughness to lead us to a clean energy future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lenore? Good evening. How are you? Good.
This has certainly been an enlightening night to be here, if at times horrifying, but since the last council meeting, I've met with CCU representatives twice. And although options were suggested to resolve our housing dilemma, none included the preservation of the integrity of the neighborhood. I am hoping that this will change in the near future since the clock is ticking on our lease expiration. I also hope that I will be able to thank the council for supporting our zoning ordinances, and a special thank you to Charlie Abel and Ramey Johnson for all their support, and also Robert Baker. Thank you all.
Thank you. Dan Duffy? Will you? Good evening.
Completely different topic. The recent hailstorm that we had last month, I know it cost the city a lot of money, and it cost the residents a lot of money. Our deductibles on their cars, another one for our house. Some people are without a job. So I'm hoping that with all that money that it's costing us, that we put money back into the city and we use local contractors. And I've been mentioning this before. I was very disappointed to see that the city is using an out-of-state contractor to fix the vehicles. I realize that that's easier probably to have the contractor that Travelers uses to come in, and then they don't have to use that. But we've got some people here that are making money. Our local contractors, our local automobile repair people, that's keeping the money right here in Lakewood, and we really should consider doing that. Now, we all know that we have to get in line because there's a lot of us with cars. But we're in line, so I guess I'm just asking the city to just do the ones that they really need right away with the out-of-state contractor, and then save the other ones. My car looks terrible, but once I got the windshield fixed, it drives the same. It just looks awful going down the road. So I would hope you guys would wait and have the city, if there's roofing damage to be done, use a local contractor. For the vehicles, try and use a local contractor. Let's put that money back in the city, and let's have people here making lots of money that they can spend at the mills once it opens back up. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We can have someone get back to you. We do always seek local businesses to do work with. Sometimes that doesn't work out, but Mr. and Mrs. Sale, do you wish to speak or just say we support? Come on down.
Good evening, council members. How are you?
Good evening.
I'm also with Heritage West and one of the neighbors here. I live at 1929 South Route Court. And Dana's been nice enough to meet with some of us as neighbors and listen to our concerns. And I just think from a standpoint, most all of you are probably familiar with Heritage West. Myself, as a Lakewood resident, I came to Lakewood from Denver at about 5th grade. I spent all the rest of my life in Lakewood, gone to Lakewood High School. And have since moved with my family to Heritage West, which is kind of all of Lakewood's a fantastic city. That's why I remain here. And certainly Heritage West is a great representative example of a family environment in Lakewood. And when you talk about a continuity of a community and a continuity of a look of community, it really becomes imperative and important to decide where we take a stand on redevelopment and development of the city. There's a lot of development going on. If you look up on Union Boulevard, that's all fine. Some of the development fits there, and certainly it's a growing community. But we need to kind of take a stand on where the development takes place and its impact on the neighborhoods. So we appreciate your concern with us and your support and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy, did you wish to speak or just echo? All right, that's great. Pat Laurie? Oh, we already, all right. Max Tyler. Good evening, sir. Nice to see you in chambers.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, as a former representative of the state of Lakewood, I appreciate being here in another role. You know, I just discovered a petition for a referendum to limit residential construction to 1% a year was recently filed. I've read through the ordinance that goes with it, although it might have been a lot easier to read the Golden ordinance since it's copied almost verbatim from that. You know, I represented Golden in the State House for 3 years and know the community well. It's a very nice town, but it's a town that is increasingly only for the wealthy as supply and demand drives prices of homes higher and higher. I was on the phone earlier today with Mayor Sloan from Golden, and she says, we cannot build affordable housing in Golden anymore. We just can't do it. It's not possible. That's not
what I envision as the Lakewood lifestyle. We currently have a very diverse economic community, but this 1% proposal will destroy Lakewood as an inclusive community and turn it into an exclusive community where only 1% of the wealthiest families can afford to live. The effect of severe limits on new residential development will put prices up and up and up. We already have a serious problem pushing people out who have lived here for decades because of rising rents. We already have a problem when your children have to move to Bailey to find an affordable place to live. New homes built right off of Colfax, Two Creeks, and Iber are going for $400,000 a year and up each. Lakewood's current median income is about $56,000 per year. These families absolutely cannot purchase a home in Lakewood today if they don't already own one. We're keeping people out of Lakewood with this kind of an ordinance who provide the backbone and the spirit of what Lakewood is today. It's increasingly difficult to find a place even to rent at this income level. According to Chaffa analysis, rents have increased in Lakewood by over 160% since 2010. Already it's true that starting teachers, auto mechanics, entry-level police, and firefighters and nurses are being priced out of Lakewood with average rents of $1,500 a month now for a single-bedroom apartment. Creating affordable apartments will become even more difficult under the 40-unit rule requiring special permission from council. This is designed with surgical precision to block affordable apartments, in spite of the specious allocation of units for up to 120% AMI. This piece alone looks very much like we're telling the 41% of Lakewood citizens who are renters that some people really don't want them living here. A very small number of people are working to throw away years and years of discussion and intense neighborhood involvement in a rewrite of the zoning code, the comprehensive plan, the transit-oriented development overlay. All the effort to intelligently plan for TOD will be thrown out and ignored to the detriment of our community with this kind of a 1% clamp on housing. Instead of smart, sustainable growth, we'll be forcing people to drive further and further for work, increasing metropolitan sprawl and increasing carbon emissions as people drive more miles between work and home. We've heard comments today from people that have an issue about climate change. Climate change is a huge issue. And what we're doing with this is putting a preference for wealthy people and forcing regular working families to drive further and further to go to work. Instead of a vibrant and diverse community, this will become a city of privilege where regular, hardworking families cannot afford to live. This 1% proposition is for the 1% of the wealthiest people who will shove out Lakewood families who no longer will be able to afford to live here. Please oppose this really bad idea that's going to really hurt the fabric and the structure of what Lakewood is today. Thank you.
Thank you. So that exhausts the folks signed up. Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, sir. And if you just tell us your name, you can give the clerk your address on your way back. That's fine. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening, members of the City Council. My name is William Kaywert. I am a member of the InfraGard EMP Special Interest Group, sponsored by the FBI. So we're back on that topic again. I'm also president of Stored Energy Systems, a Longmont-based manufacturer of emergency power equipment. This equipment protects critical infrastructure, including communications, healthcare, water treatment, fuel production from shutdown, but that's only from short-term power loss. In 2009, shortly after the effects of EMP were declassified by the EMP Commission, I realized that our business would fail in our mission and that much of U.S. society could be snuffed out by a rogue state or terrorist actor. On April 27 this year, NPR's Morning Edition ran a story, The North Korean Electromagnetic Pulse Threat, or lack thereof. In this story, NPR laughed out loud at the threat of EMP by running several seconds of cackling by a so-called expert. A large number of NPR listeners contacted the show to complain. NPR, in response, doubled down, saying that they completely supported the expert's dismissal of the threat. NPR doesn't have access to the medical records or psychiatrists of Kim Jong-un, or the Iranian mullahs, or the world's leading terrorists. Therefore, that dismissal of the EMP threat is just wishful thinking. William R. Graham, a former nuclear weapons designer and chairman of the EMP Commission, repeated in a recent article this morning, as the EMP Commission warned over a decade ago in its 2000 report, quote, the damage level could be sufficient to be catastrophic to the nation, and our current vulnerability invites attack. We encourage you to think about the consequences to your family, your friends, and other loved ones should Mr. Kim or some terrorist decide someday to take out America's power grid. Addressing the EMP problem does not require going to war, but it does require an informed public to demand that our critical infrastructures, our vulnerability to EMP is remedied. The solution is not war, but rather a hardened infrastructure that's able to shrug off an EMP attack. The good news, I do have some good news. It's pretty bad. People have started taking action. In 2013, an EMP-hardened data center was created in the Midwest. Recently, a major Texas utility built an electromagnetically hardened control room, and there was no legislature requiring that they do it. So there is private sector interest in this. And last but not least, the cost to achieve resilience does not need to be excessive. In September of 2007, the SAGE Policy Group published an economic impact assessment of an EMP attack on the Baltimore-Washington area. The study showed that protecting just 10% of critical infrastructures could substantially reduce the damage and restoration time. I request that you support the study bill that Glenn and the team have recommended.
Thank you. Good evening, sir.
Thanks for letting me slip in.
Absolutely.
My name is Sean Bailey. I live in an apartment next to Smith Reservoir. I've lived in Lakewood most of my life, and I'm also a licensed professional engineer. I'd like to provide some background to put the risk of an EMP event in the context of capabilities. There's others who can better provide background on EMP events driven by the sun, so I'm just going to talk about human capabilities. I'm sure you've heard, as not only here, but also in the news, of North Korean weapons testing. North Korea appears to be maturing 2 weapons technologies, fission bombs and satellite launch vehicles. Excuse me. As pointed out in several recent articles on the web and by several people here, if you combine these 2 technologies, you would have North Korea could obtain the capability to repeat tests that were carried out by the United States and the USSR in the early 60s. These tests involved high-altitude nuclear explosions about 250 miles up. The tests resulted in significant damage to electrical power transmission, equipment, and utilities on the ground in areas within line of sight of those explosions. 800 miles in the case of the U.S. test. This damage included failures of streetlights, telephones, power lines, high-voltage insulators, and power plants. Modern technology is believed to be far more susceptible in the equipment that was damaged during those tests. The potential for damage today is uncertain, but the damage could be catastrophic if an event similar to the 60s era tests were to occur over the U.S. mainland. Note that this level of damage to the U.S. is North Korea's stated intent in their own propaganda statements. An attack on the U.S. could be executed with a single weapon disguised as a satellite and launched to an orbit, making it pass over the U.S. North Korea would need only relatively simple refinements to their current technology developments to place a fission weapon in an orbit such that it passes over the U.S. The refinements needed, smaller fission weapons and more capable launch vehicles, are exactly those which North Korea seems to be attempting to move towards with the testing that they're doing so far. North Korea would not need more sophisticated technology like hydrogen bombs, accurate ICBMs, or reentry vehicles, the technology for which is a lot harder than most people are aware. North Korea has already launched 2 satellites into orbits that pass over the U.S., and though there's no reason to believe that those satellites carry armaments, the potential is clear. Current U.S. missile defense systems would have a limited utility to deal with any such launch because you'd have to be able to prove that the launch contained a weapon before you could intercept it. Therefore, the U.S. should institute measures to prepare for an EMP event. Preparations will help deal with not only an actual attack, but also the inevitable North Korean blackmail attempts. Options exist for protecting the U.S. infrastructure against this threat, and you've heard some mention of those tonight. Many of these options can be implemented at a local level at costs which are reasonable given the benefits. We're asking the council to allow us to come back for a study session where we can present those options and provide more background detail.
All right.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank
Mayor
you. Thanks
and
for coming out. Appreciate it. Anybody else? All right. Seeing no one else, I will close public comment. Mr. Abel, you want to address CCU even though our folks left, but I'm sure you'll reach out to them anyways.
Sure. We have been discussing the issue with the Mid-Lakewood Civic Association, other neighbors in the area, and the ladies that are tenants of CCU, as well as CCU itself. We've made significant progress. We're trying to protect the rights of the tenants, protect the rights of CCU and their students, and protect the integrity of our zoning ordinance. And thankfully, all the participants in these discussions have been more than willing to participate in give and take. So we're hoping that we can resolve this issue in a mutually beneficial way. And still working hard at it. We'll keep everybody posted.
Well said.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yep, thank you. And then, Mr. Rhodes, maybe we could connect you with our emergency management folks for a starting place, and we'll make that happen, and we can start that conversation there if that's acceptable. And then Mr. Mace left, but we are working on a grocery cart ordinance. Mr. Cox has the outline, and hopefully we'll have that coming soon. So, all right. Will the clerk please read the next item into the record?
The consent agenda consists of item 6, ordinance O-2017-9, designating the property known as the O'Kane Farm located at 6795 West 1st Avenue, Lakewood, Colorado, 80226, County of Jefferson, State of Colorado, as a local historic district.
All right, so this is the only thing on the consent agenda, and it's just a first reading, so there's no public comment on first reading. It's to set the posting, and this is kind of a cool situation. This is the Historic Commission's very first project, so we're pretty excited about that, and you can come back in a couple weeks, and there we go. I see the O'Kane folks are excited too. So you can come back in a couple weeks and hear all about that, and with that, I'll take a motion, please.
Mayor Paul, I move to order all ordinances introduced on first reading to be published in the Denver Post with public hearing set for the date included in the ordinance, all of which are included in the consent agenda items introduced into the record by the city clerk.
Second.
Motion and second. Any conversation, questions, comments? Please cast your votes. And surprise, that passes 10 ayes, 0 nays. Very cool. All right, next up we have general business. And so I want to take this opportunity to just do a quick update. A couple weeks ago, we talked about council priorities that came out of the retreat. And they're kind of general, but they all had to do with growth and density and things along those lines. And the priorities that, came out were density associated challenges, transportation and traffic, infrastructure upgrades, improvements, sidewalks, last mile connections, infrastructure upgrades, improvements in roads. So that's kind of vague, and it's really hard to really tune in to exactly what that means. So a couple things happened. One is we want to make sure that we're continuing on the council's work plan, but I took the opportunity, and I want to thank City Council for taking their time. I met with every council member over the last 2 weeks to really understand where they're at and what these issues mean to them and what they'd like to see happen. So I'd like to propose a couple things tonight moving forward. One is we, of course, want to honor the work plan, but we have the housing study, which will be presented on June 26th. That's going to help give a nice idea of where we're at with housing, what's going on. Then I would propose on July 17th, we kind of take another bucket and we call that planning and zoning. And that's when we'll be looking at the MES language, is that right? MES language. And the other things that we would add with education and suggestions and conversation from council, topics would be parking limits and ratios, residential cap multifamily, height limits and requirements, setbacks, sustainability standards for new developments, design standards, housing diversity, building space to open space. That's the idea of, in some of our growth areas, when talking to council members, they thought that maybe we could break up that area a little bit. So when you look at the growth areas, it's all purple, and maybe there's an opportunity to have less dense or more amenable, more walkable parts within that. And so that's building space to open space and open areas. So that would be another bucket on July 17th. And then the last one pertains to, unfortunately, some of the high dollar stuff. But that would be engineering download, and that would tackle fees, development fees, impact fees, fees in lieu, sidewalks, traffic, and stormwater. So that kind of gives us going on a trajectory to start to really dig into what council has told me and kind of everything. That's a synopsis of what I heard. That's what I'd like to direct staff to get ready for if council's amenable to that. One question I had, Ms. Hodson, we don't have an exact date for the engineering, but we do have a scheduled for the housing and then the planning and zoning.
That's right. We have for the housing and the planning / zoning. And then we'll find a date as soon as we can for the other one, the Public Works infrastructure one.
Okay, great. Councilor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the time that you've put into meeting with all of us. I think it was very helpful for everybody, actually.
Yeah.
And thank you for what you're just now recommending as well. I'd like to take this a little step farther, and I would like to make a motion that we have a 6-month moratorium on high-density, high-profile development. And let me just a little bit of an explanation here. This is a huge issue within our community. It's basically all that people are talking about. I believe if we have a little bit of a time to just take a pause, take a look at where we're going, what direction we're actually heading, it'll give us time to actually assess the housing study. That housing study's been out there for a year. Also, give us time to look at the Union Corridor Transportation Study. It has not gone unnoticed that the Federal Center is in play at this point. The zoning there is for very high-profile buildings. Give us a chance to actually get some more community input on that. And this actually fits with our council priorities. Give us a chance to actually address these things without having the pressure of continued development happening at the same time. I would ask for your support, and again, a motion for a 6-month moratorium, high-density, high-profile development. Thank you for your consideration.
I'd like to second that, Mayor.
All right, so we have a motion and a second, and I imagine there'll be some discussion. So, Councilor Abel.
If we're ever going to catch up on mitigating the growth that we've sustained in the last 20 years without much addition to our infrastructure, we're going to have a slowdown. It's hard enough to keep up with the current pace and mitigate what's gone before us, as well as what we're doing now. It will be almost impossible if our growth curve takes a sharp turn upward and we're still 20 years behind. I don't think we'll ever catch up that way. And I think that putting a plug in the pipeline for a few months while we discuss the ways that we can handle the pressures that growth has brought to our city would be a welcome relief and would allow us time to regroup and discuss and come to some kind of conclusion. Max Tyler mentioned the initiative that's been filed. I think that came out of frustration from folks who thought we've been talking about this for 3 years and we're still talking about it. So I think that came out of frustration with exactly the thing we're talking about here, and that a pause might provide the relief we need to reach some sort of common ground. Thank you.
So I'm going to weigh in and just say that I appreciate the merits of what was proposed, but some of the folks who are in support of this and really, brought this forward have talked about process. And we've had no public hearings. We've had no inquiry into our legal team as to what this would look like. We haven't talked to neighborhoods that frankly are seeing development and like it. We don't know how this would affect projects. We don't know what this would do to the business community. We have no idea what sending a message of a moratorium would do to shutting down a city and its progress. It's haste, it's reactionary, and I don't think it's the best way to move this city forward. I think we have some issues, and I think we have an opportunity to tackle those in a smart and efficient manner, and that's what we need to do. So I appreciate where you're coming from. And I think it looks good and it sounds good, but you have no idea what it would even stop. And I haven't had the opportunity to even have anybody articulate to me in my meetings what exact project they're seeing that they'd like to stop. So I appreciate the conversation, and I certainly will not be supporting this. Councilor Vincent?
This just thrown me off. So these questions or concerns, I guess, are off the top of my head. I don't know legally where we would stand with this, and I know what you're saying because we have some of the same issues, but I don't know what's meant by high density. We have several projects going in our ward that maybe that's what you alluded to, that people are very excited about and want to move forward, and I don't know if that would be an okay for things that are already in the pipeline or if that's a moratorium on everything. And the second that's one concern I have. So I don't know legally where that would put us. The other concern, or I guess question I would have, is I did a quick thing for 6 months, and that puts us after the election, right? July, August, September, October, November. Yeah. And I don't know what that would do to the dynamics too. And I'd be a little concerned about having a brand new council then, or potentially some more members that would have to be educated on that too. And are we passing the buck, or are we giving them an opportunity? So density is an issue, and I think as a council, we really have to move on this and move on it quickly because it has been, I think, stretched out.
This would not affect projects that are in the pipeline.
Ms. Franks?
Thanks, Mayor Paul. First, wanted to acknowledge Mayor Paul for reaching out to all of us and letting us kind of feed in all of the input that we have received from our constituents. I, too, didn't come with any prepared comments, but did want to kind of speak to the fact that since joining the council, the zoning rules have been a contentious issue because there's just a lot of concern about how the words are interpreted. There's a lot of concerns about how the comprehensive plan is supposed to be there to protect communities, to make sure things integrate well with them. And we've not seen some of those things maybe offer the protections that maybe people thought they did when they read into that. And so I'm a little bit torn here because we have had citizens month over month, now year over year, coming to us with the unintended consequences that are pressure on them. We've also seen developments that don't seem to integrate well, or the setbacks are, there's just a lot of issues with that. So we've seen a lot of things that are problematic. It is the number one thing that I'm contacted about, where folks no longer feel that we are pursuing solutions as quickly as they need us to pursue them. And I believe that that initiative came out of that level of frustration. Whether you agree with it or don't, or think it maybe swings the pendulum too far, we do have an inordinate amount of pressure of high density. We're not talking about things that are lower density. And so I just want to express that my vote will be cast based on the sheer volume for 18 months that has come in for this particular issue. And also seeing that many of these issues will take multiple sessions to solve. We're not going to solve them all at once. We have, since I joined council, a council's policies and procedures rewrite that is still nearly 18 months later, still in the works. So I'm going to be casting my vote based on the vast amount of citizen input that has told me that this is their number one issue, and they want to see us be very thoughtful and get in front of it, and they want to see our city grow in a way that is supportive to the people who currently live here, and is also finding ways to integrate all those people who we want to move here, and people who want their children to be able to stay here. But it's a balance, and so I appreciate everyone who's reached out to us. This is definitely one of the more contentious issues, and so I'll yield the floor.
Mayor Pro Tem Harrison.
I understand that our citizens are very concerned about traffic and et cetera, et cetera. We all hear about that a lot. However, I'm really worried about the definition of high density. I really need some more structure in this motion, Ramey. And even further, the other thing that I am really concerned about is what kind of message, especially in light of Colorado Mills and waiting for that to come back online, what kind of message does this give to businesses who might be considering coming into Lakewood, and or I'm just really worried about, the message that it gives. So my concern would be, I'm not, at this point, I can't support your motion. Simply for the fact that I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I don't know yet. I might be able to if I had more structure in the motion itself and knew more kind of what we were talking about. I think our list of to-dos here, if we can get through that pretty quickly, and it sounds like we're trying to, I'm not sure that we need the moratorium. We may be able to address or work on a lot of what those concerns are. So.
Councilor Wickman.
Well, I fully support the proposal, and the need is obvious, and the idea that we take time to study the study, I think is continuing to run the clock, and to sit there and say that we can't envision what the problem is going to be in the future. Well, that's the whole idea of taking a pause. I don't know what I don't know, but I know that we're getting out of control here, and if we just continue to run the clock, we're not going to get anywhere. Now, I will concede, because, I'm a process person. And if someone were to come here tonight and say, hey, I want you to vote tonight on a big issue like this, I would object. And so I would offer a compromise. I don't want to run this clock here, but I would say, why don't we take 2 weeks to have staff give us a proposed language so we have a really good motion. 2 weeks later, we have a first reading. 2 weeks after that, we have a vote. That gives us a month and a half. That strikes me as reasonable time to think about it without continuing to run the clock. So I would offer that as a suggestion. Otherwise, I would support the motion as is.
Yep. So let me throw this out to add on to that. So we had 4 public hearings on the Rooney Valley Master Plan, which was a guiding document. And you want to vote tonight without giving any notice to the public, businesses, property owners? You want to vote tonight to shut down their rights? I mean, that blows my mind in many different ways. And we have a planning commission. So don't you think that this should go to our planning commission as well? We had an issue where there's a correctional facility going in, and we thought that process was rushed. This is a building moratorium in the 4th largest city in the state of Colorado. That's pretty scary. And to just willy-nilly say, sounds good. I would question this group to tell me what the population growth over the last 5 years has been in the city. I challenge you to let me know.
6.7%.
Less than 2%. Go to DOLA and do their
6.7% over 5 years, less than 2% per year. You asked for the figure
average of
over
5 years is less than 2%.
Okay, you didn't say average. You said the growth rate for 5 years,
So,
6.7%.
and is that the highest in Jefferson County or the lowest? No idea. So why wouldn't we try to learn these things before we go out and do something that could be so detrimental to our community? I mean, this is super dangerous, and we'll take a vote. Shakti.
I agree with the process concerns, but I also have real concerns with the underlying proposal. I thought Representative Tyler spoke well to the fact that this should be an inclusive community. It should be a community that people can afford to live in. And the reality is that we have a strong economy. People are moving to this region. That involves having enough housing. Now, that creates tension in terms of traffic, so there's a lot that we need to continue to look at it in terms of where is it appropriate to build? What can we do to alleviate traffic? What can we do to design standards so that really nice buildings are getting built? But we need a more nuanced approach than what's been proposed here. So if I think about high density building in my ward, people like the residential at Belmar, and it's been getting built out recently. People are excited about the new housing in the Martishang building that's been empty for 30 years. To just stop all activity is also stopping the positive progress. And so, and I also think it's likely hurting the traffic situation because there are intelligent ways to build that reduce the amount of traffic that a certain number of people in a region will create, and making them all move farther out of the city makes traffic a bigger, more expensive problem. So I don't think this is a well thought out idea.
Councilor Gutwein.
Thank you. So I've been on council for a little over a year, and this is probably one of the biggest decisions that has been proposed, and we had no notice about this. This is not something that I would feel comfortable in voting on with a chamber that's not even a quarter of the way full, where our public has had no opportunity to comment on this or study or analyze any of the impacts. Yeah, I mean, there is no question that we need to address the density challenges and the growth challenges. We're one of the fastest growing areas in the country. We are all feeling the pain of this. And so, I think that the last few weeks and the last few months, we've put a lot of legwork into this to really fine-tune a document that was years and years in the making, that had a lot of community input. And are there ways that we need to adjust it? Yes, I think so. And I would like to do that through having intelligent conversations with our community and continuing to meet with our neighbors and making sure that we're looking at setbacks and height and sustainability standards and all of the things that you mentioned that Mayor Paul, that you know, we're all hearing about from our community and we need to address. But there's just no way I can in good faith make the biggest decision that we've made on council without any public process. Thank you.
Council President Roybal.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, after sitting down, speaking with a lot of our constituents and getting the feedback from them, and listening to who they are, yes, we have in Ward 3 such a diverse community. We have everything from multi-million-dollar homes down to the regular homes, to Belmar, modular complexes that we have. We have ranching, we have farming. And this is all in our ward, where you have multi-million-dollar homes right next to ranching homes and right next to a common area for working class folks. And yes, I understand that. What I look at, and I'm looking at this straight across, when we're building, yes, we need to build and we need to grow as a city. But when I look at this, it's carte blanche. They give you, there's a piece of property, they go in, they can build whatever they want, they move up. And what I am asking is the infrastructure, okay? The roads, the streets, the drainage systems, the sewer lines, the water lines, how can they accommodate? And one thing that hasn't been brought up more than anything else, and I brought this in conversation which was brought to me, is yes, that's the community infrastructure that we talk about is the living day to day. But what we didn't talk about is the price of doing business in our community, and we're not accommodating for that, is food. That's another one. How many grocery stores do we have in Ward 3? We have 3 of them, and they're one chain, and they have outgrown, they can't keep up with the demand. If you go to this chain, they have pallets upon pallets against the walls, and they try to keep the shelves full, and they take those pallets twice a day just to keep the food going. Now, if economics comes in and you take a look at it, and they're going to say, well, supply and demand. The cost of food is going to go up in our neighborhood. So yes, that is a factor. The water is another factor. The schools. You know, our schools right now in Ward 3 need a lot of love, and we haven't been getting them. So now we bring the high density coming in, and we bring more population coming in. What's going to happen to the schools? How are we going to be able to accommodate for that? We haven't addressed those. We haven't addressed a lot of things. We're addressing the parks. We're starting to address the streets with curbs and gutters. But let me give you the big elephant in the room. Green Gables, it's not in the city. It's just right. It's in our ward per se, but it's not. It's county. And, you know, you have massive buildup. They're going to suck down a lot of our resources in our community, which they are part of our community. Everything from grocery stores to schools. Have we answered those questions? I'm simply asking to do a moratorium until we can start answering some of those questions. Because if we don't answer those questions and we build and build and build, then it's going to come back and we're going to have to address it the hard way, and it's going to hurt. So I'm going to be supporting this.
Councilor Franks?
For those of you that know me, you know I am a process person as well. Obviously, Councilor Wickman's proposal of giving some time to this to get a legal analysis and to get public comment, I mean, that's the ideal. And so I would request that Councilor Johnson would consider adding more texture, more detail to that, so we have defined terms and we know what we would be talking about, and the public can come out and give their input. I did want to also add that I know Mr. Tyler has left, and he spoke very passionately. Oh, I'm sorry, you moved seats, so and very passionately about that. But what my folks in my ward are seeing is that the apartment units that are going in, they are by no means affordable to or attainable to folks who are entry level. They're seeing very high dollar, very high density units go in with very little consideration. And so that the reaction that I think that folks are seeing with motions like that, what Councillor Johnson's making, is that the frustration level in the community has reached critical mass, and where people are saying, well, if you're saying you're doing this as a community to be able to have entry level folks who need work, having apartments at $1,500 and $2,000 for single bedrooms probably isn't the price point that they can afford. Either that or they're making a lot more than I am. So while I hope that we can go with the more process-oriented route and get the public comment, if it does go to a vote tonight, I will be supporting it.
Okay, Councillor Vincent.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Franks on Councillor Wickman's proposal. It's too rushed tonight. I need a lot of questions answered. I need some definition around what we mean by some of this verbiage. And I would also like to get some input on the Planning Commission's role and responsibility on this, on the moratorium. So I agree with Councillor Wickman, and I think it should be postponed so we can get some more texture. I think that's your word, and information. Thank you.
Councillor Abel.
I've been swayed somewhat. I agree with the process questions. It is a large issue. There are a lot of stakeholders that haven't been involved, and I would make a friendly amendment that we go with Mr. Wickman's plan of 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and 2 weeks. I would like to mention some things. There seems to be some misunderstanding that it was mentioned this would be a building moratorium. No, it would be a moratorium on residential units. Anything in the pipeline would still be in the pipeline and still be in process. We're only talking about things that would come in as applications in the next month or two. As far as a building moratorium in the fourth largest city in Colorado, the largest city in Colorado has sustained a couple of them recently. They are legal as long as they have a definite period that can't be too long, and they have a couple of court rulings seem to say that 6 months is okay. Maybe longer than that isn't. But again, the largest city in Colorado has had moratoriums recently. And what message did it give to their developers? I don't see development slowing down much in Denver. I don't see developers saying, oh my God, there's a pause in Denver, I'm leaving. No, they're still eager to build. Lakewood has the lowest rental rate, the most affordable housing in the Denver metro area, according to our own Lakewood Profile publication we put out. Or it is lower than the average in the Denver area. Whether it's the absolute lowest in any city, I don't know. These are questions we need to have answered. The definition of density is pretty clear. I think we all know what we're talking about. But I do believe that if we want to put a pause in here, that we need to hear from all the stakeholders involved. So I would still offer the friendly amendment. And I would like to mention, I don't want to get into the debate over density tonight, but I hear so much about sustainability, and there are a lot of studies out there that say the more dense the population, the less well the population. There are many health effects. There was years ago, a behaviorist named B.F. Skinner who had a bunch of pigeons. Pigeons are very gentle creatures. And he took these pigeons and gave them plenty of food and plenty of water, everything they needed, but the space was limited. And as he put more pigeons into the limited space, the pigeons became testy, and then they became violent, and then they became murderous, killing their own kind, and then they became cannibalistic. Now, we don't expect that from the folks that move here, but density is not good for mental health. Thank you. And I would ask Ramey if she would accept that friendly amendment to go with Dave's plan.
I'd like to speak when it's my turn.
So, okay, and we have a couple more speakers, and I would just comment two things. Denver did a moratorium, but on a certain very specific product, not just blanket density. It was a very small product that they did it on. And if you talk to the mayor of Boulder, the reason why they did their moratorium 40 years ago is because they wanted density. They thought it was sustainable. They knew that they wanted a green belt around them, and they thought that they'd be able to have an opportunity to grow in and not out and have sprawl. And unfortunately for them, they're really struggling with affordability. So there's a lot of different issues, and it's one that I think can't be made in one evening. And I think that I also, after meeting with everybody, provided a nice roadmap forward to try to deal with these in the near and immediate future in a more meaningful way with everything that the city council told me that they wanted to address. So I'd hope that we would just be able to stick with that. Mayor Pro Tem Harrison.
Councilor Johnson, I'm going to ask a favor. Would you be willing to withdraw your motion at this particular point with the idea that in 2 weeks we'll have more information coming from staff in terms of what it would look like, the ramifications, and so on and so forth?
I am willing to look at the proposal that Councillor Wickman proposed, yes, but I'm not willing to stop looking at a moratorium.
I'm not asking you to quit looking at a moratorium, but I feel like we need more. We need to know what it's going to look like, what the definition would be. So you're not willing to withdraw the motion right now, but look at the process that Dave was talking about.
I'm willing to look at what Councillor Weichman has proposed, yes.
What I heard him say is that what he wanted to do is for it to go to staff, the suggestion to have staff come up with what the motion would look like, and then it would be posted in 2 weeks, and then first reading again in another 2 weeks. So I wouldn't think that we'd have even a motion tonight.
I'm willing to look at that. This is the only thing, when it's my turn to speak, I've got a few things to say.
Go ahead.
Okay. A couple things. About a month ago, I submitted a formal document for council action to open up our zoning ordinance and basically to look at the things that the mayor is talking about. I very much appreciate that. Also, part of that document suggested having a moratorium. When the mayor and I met, what was it, a week and a half ago, I mentioned it, you immediately dismissed it and were against it. So it's a little misleading to say that this was just sprung on you. You knew that a week and a half ago, Mayor. High density is kind of like pornography. We all know it when we see it. All we have to do is look at the apartment house on Union Boulevard to understand what high density is all about. But you are absolutely correct. Having more definition as far as how many units, that's absolutely appropriate. I understand that. The reason I am supportive of a moratorium, we need to have actual time to assess what the housing study is going to say. This thing has been in the pipeline for months and months. Literally 2 years ago, I asked if I could have how many apartment houses, how many apartment units versus residential pieces of property in the 13th Avenue corridor, and we couldn't get that information. This is not rocket science. You reach a certain threshold where it's hard for residential neighborhoods to continue to survive. I am concerned what we are doing to the adjacent neighborhoods with some of this stuff. There is something that is being proposed by Safeway on South Union. There is great concern. All this is going to do is stop high density, high profile. It does not affect residential nor commercial. I agree with what Councillor Wickman is saying to give it some time for more definition. That is appropriate. I can go with that. So yes, let's do that then. But we need to take a pause and make sure that we know exactly what we are doing. This is all that I have been hearing for 2 years. People are wondering, are we listening? I am listening. And I want everybody to know that.
Okay. Councilor, can I ask you a question, a follow-up? Do you know how many units are in the queue or being proposed?
No, I do not.
Okay. Just curious. Thank you. Councilor.
I think we're evolving towards where I hope we'd like to go. There Karen's question about can we vote on something major tonight, as I just indicated. No, not so much. But what we can vote on tonight is the process. That's legitimate. And if we all agree that the motion tonight is setting the process of 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and 2 weeks, that's something I think we can vote on tonight.
So there's a motion and a second on the floor. I haven't heard amendment made or accepted. By who? Please remind me.
I offered a friendly amendment to
Was
go
it
with
accepted?
the 2, 2, and 2. We're waiting for an answer for that.
Okay. So before we do that, Tim, talk to us about process and about dates and about planning commission.
Yeah, the first thing that should be clear is that if there's to be a public process, and there should be a public process for something of this nature, is that you have to have the process before you make the decision. You don't decide to impose a moratorium and then talk about it. You ask to discuss it, ask to put it on an agenda, and then discuss it and have the public input involved that's necessary to decide whether that's what you want to do. So I'm hearing a couple of different things about how this would proceed from here. There seems to be some agreement that if you're going to talk about it, we need to have some more time injected into the process, and I think that's true. But I think if there's a motion to ask staff to present something that can be discussed, the beginnings of a discussion, that's fine. I don't think we're in a position to ask staff to prepare the moratorium ordinance when we haven't had the discussion of what it should look like and what should be involved and what high density is defined to mean and so on. So at various points in the last few minutes, we've heard a recognition that there needs to be that kind of a process. And so I don't think there's the idea of a friendly amendment is moot if the motion's not going to happen. The motion should be something different than what's been proposed to get it into the discussion item. We can't have, as someone said earlier, a major item like this that was not even on for discussion on the agenda, never mind formal action. So I think there needs to be those steps first.
Okay.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I did not address Planning Commission, but the role of Planning Commission is to advise the City Council on land use matters and to make recommendations, and I think this is something that would be expected to go to the Planning Commission first. Councilor Abel is correct that there's law that moratoria are appropriate when they are of reasonable duration. I think they also need to be of reasonable scope and reasonable purpose, and that needs to be part of the package. And I think having the discussion and proposing the idea without the public input first doesn't help our ability to identify it as a reasonable measure.
Okay. So thanks for making that process clear. So I guess, let's see here, our next meeting is the 19th is a study session, and then we have the 26th is the housing study, which is a regular meeting. July 3rd is canceled. So the idea is you need to put together criteria. I mean, we need to have public hearings. I mean, in my opinion. I mean, if this is something, and I know there's this urgency to do it quick, but I'm sorry, when you're looking at doing something like this, you have a lot of stakeholders that you need to hear from. And I go back to the Rooney Valley Master Plan. I mean, 4 meetings, and then the 5 folks up here wanted to send it to a vote of the people. But yet you're willing just to say, yeah, we're just going to put a pause. Mr. Cox.
What I was trying to get across is that with any proposal of significance, the normal process is to have a discussion on the agenda, scheduled on the agenda, as to whether that's something the council wants to pursue. And then there's a decision about whether to pursue it by directing staff and so on. So there has to be a decision made as to whether this is something that you want to proceed with. Deciding tonight not to vote for it does not mean it cannot be pursued through that normal course. I'm just saying that we didn't have the agenda item. We didn't have anything for the public to know about. Mm-hmm. There aren't many people here.
The idea would be a direction to direct staff to do a study session to start to talk about all the different things involved within
whatever steps you think are necessary to the process. Yeah, that would be the direction staff would want.
Hodson.
Well, and if you wanted to go in front of the Planning Commission and get their feedback, the next meeting would be July 19th. They meet on the 3rd Wednesday of the month, so that would be July 19th.
Well, I mean, that would go with the flow of everything, because if we're going to have a study session and people want to go to their ward meetings, and I mean, everything that we've heard from the folks up here.
Mayor Paul.
Yes, ma'am.
I withdraw my motion, but I would like to substitute it with what Tim is suggesting. We need to at least be looking at this.
Okay, thank you.
Would this be kind of a consensus action then?
Well, I mean, yes and no. You can do however you would like, but before we jump on a vote, let me just bear with me. Tim, go ahead. I think you were going to weigh in.
Well, but I was hesitating appropriately. Let me say this, Councilor Abel, there was an item that you brought to staff's attention earlier that I wanted to address with you at some appropriate time that concerned a similar process question, and my leaning was, you know, the significance of the item helps dictate what the process should be, and if there's no agenda item, there ought to at least be a motion to take the action forward at this point. I think that's when there's some sort of general agreement, and then you take the next step by way of consensus. That's really what that's meant to do, advance the ball on something like that. But I would think that a motion would be appropriate if the direction is to have staff begin this process and get it on the Planning Commission agenda and so on.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Franks.
Just a couple of quick things to add. I think it's really important for those of us who are up here to be very conscientious that we don't belittle fellow council persons' positions on anything. I think all positions are valid, and I think that, you know, we're here to listen, we're here to absorb. I've learned a lot from fellow counselors, but I just would caution us all to be cognizant of not belittling others' positions. Two, I would like to at least offer the community's perspective on some of this, that process moving very slow and much of our language being subject to interpretation. Those are things that are those unintended consequences that I preach about a lot. That's why it's so important when we're looking at things to make sure that the language is sound, it's tight, it's understood by all. That way we don't get into these things where folks see that the process is moving forward at such a very slow pace, they start to become desperate and reach out and become very angry. I think that's something that we have to acknowledge. And all those unintended consequences, I think, are just coming to fruition. People are just seeing enough pressure. So I just want to caution us all to be open to hear every opinion and to maybe not take time to belittle it, but really offer an alternative or a better suggestion.
Councilor Wickman.
I think I heard Ramey make a motion to put this on the agenda, and I would just add to that, let's put it expedited would be the emphasis here. You were going through the calendar, and I don't have a calendar in front of me, and I guess I'm thinking we have a study session next week. Why don't we start talking about it then? We have the meeting after that. We could put like a first reading or something like that. And if you can send it to the planning commission ASAP, as physically fast as possible, you know, I would be happy to. I would like to include them again. And if excuse me, if this stretches it out for 2 months. Again, I could live with that. If we start going beyond 2 months, we're just dragging our feet again. As far as this being a terrible thing, you know, it is just a temporary thing for 6 months. I don't think it's the end of the world. So, like I said, I would agree to if we could do an extended process for a month and a half, 2 months, but no further, no longer than that.
I second that, and I call for the question.
Okay. So,
Councilor Roybal, which item did you second?
The two, and the two.
Right, the motion on the floor was Councilor Johnson's, which I understood to be to. No, sir. Her second motion.
Oh.
And there had been no request for a second made yet.
I believe I removed the first motion and went with what Councilor Councilor Weichman had suggested.
Which then I second, and then now I call for the question.
Okay.
It had not been seconded before.
It had not been seconded before, and what I heard Councilor Wickman say just now was not exactly the same as what had been proposed earlier in terms of timing. You've offered a little bit more flexibility in terms of timing, so I'm not entirely sure what the proposal is now on the floor. Your original suggestion, Councilor, was...
Oh, I'm not looking at my calendar. I know you threw out a planning commission date and stuff like that. Are there things we can make on the calendar, make it work, not like we'll get around to it when we've got an empty spot. I'm saying readjust the calendar to make these things happen within a month and a half to 2.
Okay, so...
Is that possible?
Well, and originally I started out this conversation with, we have a housing study update, which is pretty expansive on June 26th. That's a study session. And that is really meant to be informative for this council to be able to look at a decision going forward to better understand. We just heard tonight from some folks who don't know what we have in the queue, what we don't. That's what that intent was. And then July 17th, we were trying to go through a lot of this heavy duty stuff. I mean, this is going to take us a while. But we still have planning commission potentially at the end of July.
But what's on the schedule for June 19th?
June 19th is the sustainability plan update.
Okay, well, I think this ought to take precedence. I was like, put that on to June 19th.
Well, I don't think that we're going to direct staff in that by one council member, but I think that
would be my motion.
Point of order, the motion's been called.
So this is a mess, and to say that we're going to ask staff to prepare a moratorium conversation by next week, next Monday night.
The question's been called.
So, I know there's still questions. Question's been called, seconded.
Yeah,
the calling of the question.
Attempt to call the question. We were still ironing out what the motion exactly was. There had not been a request for a second. Councilor Roybal made the second and then asked to call the question. That's a voting item to call the question. But I think what's most important is that we understand what motion is on the floor, whether that exact motion or that particular motion has been seconded. And again, Councilor Johnson, I heard you say you were adopting Councilor Wickman's proposal. He's now kind of changed that a little bit based on some of the input. So I want to make sure there's agreement even there that you understand what his timing proposal is.
I support expediting this as soon as possible. There's frustration in our community that has been boiling for 2 years. We've got to address it soon. And I believe, what, Counselor Wickman, you said try and get it on the agenda as quickly as we can. Is it possible to do that? To add that to the study session that we've got going on?
The one next week? Or
Mm-hmm.
which date are we talking about? The 26th?
That's the sustainability annual report, is that right?
That's next week.
That's next week.
That's
the
right.
19th.
A week from today.
26th is
How long should that take? Can we add this and have two parts to that?
Frankly, I don't know if we have full attendance. I'm going to ask for a recess at 9 for 10 minutes to regroup. This is starting to spin, and it makes no sense to me. So I'm going to have a quick recess for 10 minutes. We'll be back at 9:10. Lakewood City Council meeting. We are reconvening the June 12th meeting at 7 p.m. We left off with a motion and a second, and actually we left off on a motion and a second, then a motion to call the question. And what I'd like to see is if we could have those all pulled back so we could start over and get this thing back on track. Mr. Cox.
Well, I would agree there's a lack of clarity as to the direction we're taking. There was a motion. There was no second at that time, but no request for second. There was a sort of a suggested timetable proposed by Councilor Wickman, and then Councilor Roybal made the second, which I interpreted to mean a reaction to Councilor Wickman's action. So we've got a bit of a dumpster fire going here, and I think it would be, going back to what we said before the break, which is the first step in the process should be a proposal to do something, a description of that proposal, and then in the form of a motion with a second, and then discussion as to whether to pursue that course of action. Timetable is something that can get figured in. Things take priority and precedence over other things. If that's the direction to staff, that it be an expedited matter, staff will figure out the most expedited course of action possible, or suggest some timing. But I think we need to start with the substance. What is proposed? Do we have a second on that? Do we have a support for that motion? And if that would require withdrawal of the previous motion, the second, the motion to call the question, that would be the cleanest way to get there, but I defer to the council members who made those actions.
I'm lost.
As I understood it, the motion that's on the table is Councilor Johnson saying, I'll withdraw my original motion, which was to vote on whether to have a moratorium tonight. In place of that, you proposed Councilor Wickman's suggestion, which I heard initially as a timing suggestion more than a substantive decision. It is, if we're gonna do a moratorium, let's propose this time frame. And Councilor Johnson, you then withdrew your original motion and said, I propose that we do what Dave suggested. As it happens, by the time we got back to Councilor Wickman, he had, modified that timetable a little bit. What I'm saying is, let's not talk about timing. We understand that those who are in favor of this are proposing an expedited time frame, but let's focus on what it is that we want the council members to decide. You all have to decide whether this is something to pursue at this time or not. So I would think that a withdrawal of the motion to call the question, a withdrawal of the motion that was made prior to that would get us back on something of a clean slate, and then we could start with the original proponent.
Am I up?
Sure.
Okay, so you're suggesting a withdrawal, correct?
Of your second motion, yes.
That's fine. Folks, do you understand how awesome this is? We are actually looking at development, and we're expediting what we've been talking about and hearing about for 2 years. This is the best news ever. I am so tickled to death that we're getting there. Thank you. Okay, process is important. Is it possible next week, let's make it possible if we can, to have a study session on a moratorium and on language? This is important. It certainly would probably take a higher priority over sustainability, or perhaps we can have them both. And then the next week on the 26th, look at language for an ordinance regarding a moratorium. And then on July 10th, have a first reading. This is awesome. We're making progress, folks. I'm thrilled.
So, but we're missing a few pieces there.
Okay.
One is the Planning Commission.
Okay, let's see what we can do to get the Planning Commission
The other
included.
part is the new adoption that this council directed to make sure that we have at least 2 weeks worth of information in the bucket. So
Posted in advance. So the next week is a study session for the Sustainability Award annual report, and that's been posted online because of this new model that we're going to post in advance. So And also, the Planning Commission meets on the third Wednesday of every month, and they require a 4-week in advance information. So we send packets 4 weeks in advance to the Planning Commission. So typically, this would be something that would go to the Planning Commission. The next meeting, of course, is the June 21st, which is next Wednesday. There's not time for that. And if we went to July 19th, I don't know that we'll have the information ready in the next week to send to Planning Commission. So that just needs to be reconciled. The meeting after that is August 16th as it relates to a Planning Commission meeting. So that's pushing us out.
Just out of curiosity, is it possible for the Planning Commission to join us next Monday at the study session?
Yeah, I think the problem was that meeting has been posted with what it's going to be, and to add a joint meeting with the Planning Commission, for example, or a joint study session doesn't give much time for either the commission or the public to be part of that.
Gives a week, doesn't it?
We've done things with less notice.
Okay.
Okay, so here's another option. We could scrap the July 17th issues, which was the parking limits and ratios, residential cap, multifamily height limits, because this was going to be a ton of work for staff to come with a bunch of different information and changes. Scrap that and turn that one into a moratorium discussion. And that gives staff plenty of time to try to get that figured out. So that would be July 17th, the moratorium discussion in depth. And that could be a joint, well, I don't know if that could be a joint, but that could go to the Planning Commission then on the night. Now it would still have to go in August.
Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I understand the attorney's position on the Planning Commission and land use matters. This would seem to me to be more of a policy issue. And I'm looking at the charter here. I'm not sure that, although I would like to go through the Planning Commission with just about anything we do that involves the future of our land use, it doesn't strike me that the policy issue we're talking about has the direct land use requirement that requires the Planning Commission. But I will defer to the to our attorney on that.
In fact, I had just been suggesting to staff that there's probably discretion for the council as to whether the item goes to the Planning Commission. It doesn't fit neatly into the basket of land use matters like other items do. And as to your own comment, I think the Planning Commission's input on something like this is helpful, is advisable, but I do think that it's not a mandatory process. We don't have a rule book for moratoria that say you have to go to the Planning Commission. So it would seem that it would be within council's discretion to decide not to include that in the process. But if I could just back up to where we started this after the break, we fell into the discussion of timing again, and I think we need to cover that, but only after we've established that there's a directive to proceed with this matter. So, Councilor, if you wanted to restate your general proposition as a motion, and we get a second, we have some discussion as to whether this body wants to bring to direct staff to schedule and prepare and do all that is necessary to have an expedited discussion on a moratorium. I think that's where we need to begin, and then we can figure out the timing as we go to make it as quick as it possibly can, giving it the attention it needs.
Okay, let me make a motion.
Hold up. Council President Roy Ball needs
I would like to withdraw calling the question, and I would also like to withdraw my second on the previous motion.
And Councilor, you had withdrawn your previous motion, I think.
Correct.
So we're back to the clean slate, and you're about to give us another motion.
Are you having fun yet, guys? Okay. Okay, help me through this to make sure we get it right. I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to expedite discussion on an ordinance regarding a moratorium, a short-term moratorium regarding high-density, high-profile development.
Two questions. Are we back to the 6 months, or are we considering a different time frame? The original motion.
6 months, I think, is
And
by the time this gets acted on, it'll be beyond November, frankly.
Second question, you said high density, high profile. Is it limited to residential? Residential, or is it all high density, high profile development?
Why don't we just say multifamily?
Not to include commercial. What
if with all due respect, if you agree to direct staff to bring this to a study session, that's really you can tell us moratorium 6 months, multifamily, or give us those bones that we can put together for you, and then through your conversation at the study session and including the public's comments during the public hearings, then it starts to develop into exactly what that is. So if you want to make it broad with a 6-month moratorium to address or whatever that is, then during the study session is when you start to mold that through the conversation and listening to the public.
is my motion adequate for that?
For that.
I'll second that.
Okay, could you clarify the motion, please? Yeah.
I made a motion to direct staff to expedite discussion on a moratorium ordinance. Correct? For 6 months.
Residential.
Yeah. Residential.
Do you have that, please? Clerk, does everybody have that? No. Do you have it? Well, let's be clear so we don't go back to where we were.
Yeah, and I agree with the city manager that it can be general. If it's residential, that sounds like all residential. If it's high density, high profile, that's a category of residential. We're getting more specific, but I don't think the goal was to put a moratorium on all residential development.
No.
Okay. So high density, high profile, direction to staff to prepare, expedite discussion of a moratorium ordinance of 6 months duration on high density, high profile residential development. Is that?
I know.
That's okay with the seconder?
Yes.
So there's a
second that.
Motion and a second. Are there questions, comments? I have a bunch. I'm going to clear the board because I don't know where these are from. Hold on. All right. Relight up if you want to speak to this. Councilor Gutwein.
Okay. Thank you. So I guess I have a lot of questions, but I think as we're talking about this, I'm just thinking about the parking issue that we just faced, where first we had some people who were impacted because students were parking in their streets, and then we responded and put signs up, and then after that, then the students, and those families were impacted, and they hadn't been involved in those initial conversations. And so we ended up having some kind of unintended consequences, and that's on such a more, I don't want to, just a smaller issue than this is going to be. So I just want to make sure that as we're considering this, and I am definitely open to considering everything, that we have enough thought and care and time put into this. So I was wondering a couple things. Do we have any high density, high profile items currently in the queue? Do we know? Do you know? That
it probably depends on the definition of those terms. We probably have some apartment structures or condo structures in the development profile right now. I can think of a couple.
And then could you could anyone give me some kind of perspective on how other cities have formulated the kind of precision moratoriums that we were talking about? Denver, you know, they didn't have a blanket. They had a very fine-tuned.
So I believe the moratorium in Denver was specific to a certain type of row house. So they were having problem with row houses turned 90 degrees to the street. So they had a moratorium on that specific housing type while they wrote an ordinance about it.
And you know, I guess, how long of a process did they go through to figure out that they needed to just address that specific housing type? I'm
not sure the process they went through.
I guess the reason that I'm asking is that, you know, I think if we're going to do a moratorium and we need to be very specific about exactly what this would be impacting. And even right now, you know, high profile, high density, that definitely eliminates some items, but it's not incredibly specific. And so I just want to make sure that when we do talk about timing, that we can give this the due time and process and research that this would deserve. And if that is going to be time when we're looking at a July 19th or July 17th type of discussion. So.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Harrison.
I guess I really want, if we pass this evening, the thing that I am very concerned about is making sure that we've got really firm definitions of what we'd be talking about. I'm not sure I get what what we're talking about when we talk high profile, what that means, if that means lots of floors, if that means pulled to the street. I'm not sure what those are defined as. So I get high density, but when we're talking about some of this other stuff, it really makes me nervous. I'm concerned about this whole concept, but I support the idea of talking about it, especially since Councillor Koop is not here. He needs to be heard in this discussion as well, because his ward is just as affected as the rest of us. So my comments. Thank you.
Shakti.
At some level, I'm happy to discuss anything. At another level, I think we have very limited time and a lot of important issues. And so if we spend a lot of time talking about something that seems to me like a ham-fisted approach, we haven't been talking about the things that feel to me like we're more likely to agree on and are more likely to actually address the problems. So that's why I don't think it makes sense to move forward with this.
Councilor Abel.
I don't agree. This has been the major issue that all of our ward members of our community, no matter which ward, have been stressing for more than 18 months, since before I got here. And I think if you want to limit our discussions to things we all agree on, then we're not going to talk about much. Or do you want to talk about things that only the majority agrees on? I just don't understand where that comment came from. So I think it's a worthy topic. I think that we're setting some very careful and cautious parameters, and it is certainly what's on the mind of many of our community members. So I would be more than happy to have this discussion at length.
Thank you. Okay, I will not be supporting this, and I think I said a couple reasons why. Process for sure, timing, vagueness, but I would rather, you know, have staff start working on the more what we've heard about are the symptoms of density, rather than just saying, well, we're going to debate whether we should shut it down or not. Even if we shut it down, you're still having things being built. I'd rather have us focus with the community on what we've really heard from them, and that's parking limits, ratios, residential cap, multifamily heights, setbacks, sustainability standards, design standards. Everything that we really have heard, I'd rather see us go in that direction and start to really make meaningful change, long-lasting change. These are going to be big issues if we tackle them, and I think that it will lead towards better development, so I will not be in favor of this motion. Councilor Wickman.
I just want to respond to what you just said there. I think we're looking at doing both. We're going to do the moratorium right now, and then with the time that we've given ourselves, then we're going to address all those issues that you just mentioned at length. But the point is, if we don't have the moratorium, in the meantime, like I say, the bulldozers are running. So we're going to do both with this motion.
All right. Councilor Vincent.
I just want to make sure, I guess to Councilor Wickman's point, that if we talk about the moratorium, that we've also got the other things on the agenda so those don't get pushed out till whenever.
So certainly, but we only have so much bandwidth. I'm not sure folks understand. Public hearings there's a lot of things. If we decide to change that list that I just mentioned, that's a lot to it. That's really starting to pull apart our zoning and comp plan. So, I think that's more meaningful and more impactful than spending our time on a moratorium that we don't even know what it could stop or what it will stop.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. So, Councilor Gutwein.
I'm wondering if we are to look at the questions that you proposed, and after that discussion, if we are able to come up with meaningful action forward that addresses these concerns, like height restrictions, setbacks, density, design standards, all of that stuff, so that we are seeing and fine-tuning what is going to come down the pipe if this is even necessary to talk about a moratorium. So I would like to say that we should discuss whether or not to do a moratorium after we have that discussion that is already planned. I don't know. I think that if we just sidetrack all of the work that we've put into, and all the input that we've gained already on the comp plan, and just, speed this process through to do a moratorium, then I'm just not sure that we're going to be serving our community in the best way. So I would like to consider having a moratorium after that discussion.
There's a motion and a second, and it's up to that maker to accept that or not.
I do not.
A motion and a second. So let's just go ahead and vote unless you have a comment. Okay, so a yes vote would be to proceed with the moratorium, and then we'll have to figure out the timing, moratorium language, sorry. And a no vote would be to not do that, so please cast your votes. Sorry. Now they should be going. All right, and that motion passes with 6 yes, 4 no's, the no's being Paul, Gutwein, Harrison, and Shakti. So now the next step is the process for how to move forward with this.
So did you just direct us to do that in lieu of the land use list?
No.
No, okay. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm just curious, when do you want to, what's the time frame for you to start putting together what this would look like.
Well, there are several implications that we just need to consider, some of which are budget implications. For a 6-month moratorium, we would need to study, and we're certainly not prepared to do that, what kind of revenue loss that would be and what the impact would be on personnel who work in the area of development. We need some time to post this meeting, and typically we do a 2-week. So let's see, the next study session is July 17th, when we had intended to do that other list of land use. So you're saying that's not soon enough?
No, that's fine. I guess, though, we need to look at, we're not going to have a study session that night on a moratorium and that list of 10 different things.
Okay.
I mean,
So
I don't
it's
know
in
how
lieu
unless
of.
we want to be here for 10 hours.
One, staff can't prepare both of those things by now.
Yeah, both are concentrated effort. And did we hear also that we're going to, no, wait, never mind. I was going to bring up the planning commission issue, but I guess we can discuss that at the study session.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so staff recommendation is that we do this instead of the list that you had identified from your meeting with council.
Yep.
That puts us after the housing study, which is the 26th, and that's July 17th. That should be time for us to put something together and to talk about what those ramifications are.
Yep. And then in the meantime, we'll try to look at putting that bucket of all those other issues sometime further down the road. Yep, Ms. Vincent?
Is there, I don't want to, this is a difficult thing for me, but I don't want to lose all the things, the action items that the council agreed last, when did we meet? February? Not to look at those in lieu of strictly a moratorium. I guess what I'm trying to say, is there any compromise that we can do, that we can look at the moratorium issues and still keep somewhat on track for the land use issues and some other things? Is there any part and party of things that we can do together with that?
From a staff workload perspective, we can do one or the other. We can't do them both at the same time. So that's really up to you to direct us. Which do you want us to do and when? So it sounds like we were just directed to have a conversation about a 6-month moratorium on high-profile, high-density development in lieu of the work on the 17th. Frankly, we can't do both.
Yeah,
I may have messed up.
So I would say, also with that, okay. Let me see here. So we have July. All right. Councilor Franks.
I guess I'm just having trouble connect. If we just push that one out, just leapfrog it out one, that doesn't seem like that's kicking the can too far down the road. Like I said, I'm still working on something that's 18 months old. I'm willing to back burner that if that helps. This is our number one issue. If we need to take off the council's policies and procedures, which is from not this last planning session, but the one before, if we need to slow that one down, again, you guys decide. But this seems like if we put that in on the 17th, we just leapfrog the other one to the 2-week, the next session out. Would that not work?
From a staff workload perspective, that might be difficult. If 2 weeks from the 17th is the study session on the comprehensive plan. So
Going into budget in August. When do we start budget?
Yeah, budget starts in the end of August. Let's see. So study session is in September this year. It's mid-September is the study session on the proposed budget. And remember, a budget has to be adopted by end of October by charter. Mm-hmm. So that gives us ample time to have, 6 or 7 weeks of public hearings about the budget. And there are implications from Colorado Mills, and then if we go forward with a moratorium, that has implications on our budget that we need to make some changes.
Can I ask a question? What's the focus of the comprehensive plan? What is the action that's...
So that's our annual update on the progress in the comprehensive plan. So there are 404 action steps in the comprehensive plan. We come back every summer and let you know how much we've accomplished and how those actions are going.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that that's not a priority, but that would not even rise up on my radar screen at this particular point. I don't know if everyone else agrees with me, but again, density is the thing that if you're wondering how many phone calls, emails, texts, in-person visits, it's all around the density.
So, Councillor Franks, we are talking about the conversation on the moratorium on the 17th.
Right, but we were talking about how we might have to bump something in order to get the keep fast
The
track
list of land.
that list of
land
land
use.
things. And I'm saying in my personal purview, the update on the comprehensive plan does not outrank the moving forward on the issues that Mayor Paul outlined.
Can I suggest that staff go back and look at this, understanding the importance, and we also have to look at staff availability and those kind of things, and staff workload. So if every study session is focused on planning staff, it's easier from a workload distribution if we put a public works in there and do like a transportation, which is still very important, but it gives planning staff a chance to work whatever the next topic is. And now we're posting 2 weeks in advance, so there's kind of that adjustment too. So please allow us to go back and kind of work this, understanding that you want to do both the conversation on the moratorium, as well as you don't want to lose this list of land use concerns that you identified with the conversations with the mayor.
Councilor Abel.
I agree with both Councilor Vincent and Councilor Franks. To Councilor Vincent's comments, the discussions about the effects of density are part and parcel of this larger discussion that would include a moratorium. While the comprehensive plan is important, I think that these issues have priority over a review of where we are, what steps we have taken in the last few months. I have confidence in staff to know that they will be working on that they will be acting to keep our comprehensive plan in front of us, and that we are taking care of the steps it requires. So simple confirmation of yes, we're doing that, I think takes a back seat to the importance of these land use issues that are on everyone's lips in our community. I mean, from folks who are opposed to more density to folks who want to see more density. So it is, I think it's the topic of the moment, as well as the ancillary effects that Ms. Vincent spoke to.
Councilor Wickman.
I just want to second what everybody's been saying about it should be a higher priority. I'm looking at the calendar, and June 19th looks to me our workshop is just the sustainability annual report. I think we all agree that this is a higher priority. June 26th, housing study, that doesn't necessarily have to take the whole evening. July 10th, I don't see we have anything going on that evening. So, I think we can be a little bit more efficient in the use of our time. And if we need to go for some long meetings or stuff like that, we need to be doing both. Let's double up. I have to make the comment, the last month, I haven't felt our meetings have been, all that productive. We spent an awful lot of time. I'm not sure we did too much in the last month. So I'd like to kind of double up here.
Mayor Pro Tem Harrison.
I think it's been said. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. So we'll get that figured out, and we'll go forward with the study session on a moratorium, and then from that study session, we'll look for council discretion on whether they want to go forward with that to a public process. Okay, all right. So general business, let's see, executive report, nothing.
I just have a few quick things. Thank you. I I just want to announce that our hail damage permit applications are caught up. Staff worked over the weekend. We got so many requests, and they worked long hours, but that's done. So that's a really good thing. We have a new provisional passport agent that she started on June 5th. So we're going to begin offering passport services Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 by appointment only. That's a very popular service. Yes, and I have one more comment, and that is Carmody Plan Development will be open to the public on Monday, June 19th. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Council reports, Mayor Pro Tem.
Ooh, I have a wonderful happy birthday to give to a Ward 5 resident by the name of Jack Schultz, who will be celebrating his 100th birthday. So happy birthday, Jack. We want you to keep coming to meetings. Also, I got to participate over the weekend at a Flag Day ceremony. And I'll tell you, if you ever wanted to feel like the future generation is doing what they need to do and that we will be in good hands, go to a Boy Scout troop meeting and watch them, and you'll know that we'll be in good hands. And finally, talking about youth coming, I also got to attend the graduation of the Lakewood Youth Police Academy, and that was really great too, to see I think about 12 or 15 young people. That phenomenal. I'll tell you, we are lucky to have these youth in our community and involved as they are, so we're going to be in good hands. Thank you.
Great stuff. Council President?
No report.
Okay. Shakti?
No report.
Amy?
I'd just like to thank the folks that came to talk about EMPs. That's actually a big deal. And this last week in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article regarding North Korea and the potential of an EMP. If you read the book 1 second after, although it's fiction, it gives you a flavor of what could happen. Thank you.
Councilor Abel?
I'd like to echo what Councilor Harrison said about the Lakewood Police Youth Academy continuation. And it wasn't, what impressed me was twofold. The youngsters who gave up their summertime in order to find out what, and dip their feet into what law enforcement would be like. But the most rewarding thing was seeing the smiles on the face of our officers who dedicate their time, and they've done this for, I believe, 13 years now. And they are, they're very good at relating to these kids, and they seem to enjoy it a great deal. Also, Ward 1 will have no meeting in July. Our first Saturday meeting would be on July 4th, and that is the July 4th, or I'm sorry, be on July 1st, and that is right the July 4th weekend. So, in addition, on June 17th, our Police Honor Guard will convey a flag to the nephew of U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant Fay V. Moore. Sergeant Moore was lost in November 1943 in the Pacific Theater. His remains were uncovered in just a few years ago, I believe sometime around 2012, 2013. He was identified through DNA. While he was not a resident of Lakewood, his nephew, his only surviving relative, his nephew Larry Denton of Lakewood, will be presented a flag in the sergeant's memory at Lakewood High School at 1 p.m. on Saturday at the memorial for World War II veterans that lost their lives from Lakewood. So if you can turn out and honor the memory of Sergeant Moore, I'm sure it would be appreciated by all of our veterans. Thank you.
Great. Councilor Vincent?
Just a couple of quick things. The Ward 2 meeting is this Wednesday at 1580 Teller, 7:30 a.m. And I'm going to try to say this succinctly because I think this is a good thing. But I ran it by some people and they didn't understand what I was talking about at all. So I'm going to say this. So We had a Colfax plan, and then somebody took the risk to redevelop JCRS Lamar Station Plaza. Within that, then the gentleman, Gene, he started the farmer's market there. Then he opened the Pro Kitchen, which is directly related to commissary for food trucks, and it's also got a banquet hall. Well, a neighbor across the street wanted to start a food truck business. She went down and saw Gene. She started her business at Pro Kitchen, and then she opened up her first thing this Saturday at the farmer's market at JCRS/Lamar Station Plaza. So I woke up at 3:19 in the morning thinking, oh, that's what it's about. So I wanted to share that.
Great. Councilor Franks?
Just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge everybody here on council. I know that we often have lively and difficult discussions, and I appreciate everybody's feedback. Wanted to thank all the Ward 4 people who came out to our meeting, and wanted to also give a personal thanks to Ms. Hodgson and Chief McCaskey. I had an issue that required some coordinated attention, and they gave it quick service and to a good resolution. So I just wanted to say I appreciate that.
It's a good one.
Thank you. I also want to thank the council for a lively discussion, and I'm eager to have this conversation with our community, and that was a tough vote. So looking forward to the discussions that will come after this with everybody. Also, just wanted to say, unfortunately, had the experience of having to call our first responders this week, and every second counts, and it was amazing the response that we got. So I feel really thankful that we have a service that we can rely on and gets there quickly, and can take care of all of us here in Lakewood. So thank you.
Councilor Wickman? No report. All right. Michelle? Anybody else? All right. We will adjourn at 9:57 p.m. Great. Thanks.